We have three great speakers, and I will let Namrata introduce them later on. But first, let me tell you a little bit about what the Leadership and Strategy Special Interest Group does. As its name suggests, we focus on leadership and strategy because we want to encourage business leaders to elevate themselves and think more strategically instead of driving blindfolded. And two, we want to promote leadership done right at a time, of drastic changes in the business environment and putting the focus on people first. And today we're going to put the focus on women first. According to the UN Women website, women serve as heads of state or government in only 22 countries in the world, including Finland. And 119 countries have never had a woman leader. At the current rate, gender equality in the highest positions of power will not be reached for another 130 years. I read a Forbes article dated November 2019. It was stating that in the EU still is 61 years away from gender parity. Women represent only 15% of general managers, 30% of managers, and 36% of the members of the European Parliament. And according to the same article, by 2050, the EU could increase their per capita GDP by nearly 10% should it choose to invest in gender equity. So that's between double to triple the size of Apple's entire market capitalization, just to put things into perspective. So gender equity in the workforce could help create 10.5 million jobs by 2052. So I don't have to tell you how important today's discussion is about. And so we cannot ignore such data. And so today we will provide you with some very practical advice to promote female leadership in the workplace. And now I turn to Namrata to introduce our amazing panelists.
Great. Thanks a lot, Laurent. And welcome everybody. And let's start by introducing our amazing panelists. We have with us joining today, Anna Jussila. She's the founder and CEO of We Encourage. She's an entrepreneur for more than 10 years, experience in retail sector, a lecturer, a consultant in the fields of trends, profitability, and marketing. Welcome and thanks for joining us, Anna. Next we have... Thank you. Next, we have Minna Ayo. She's a CFNL2 trainer, entrepreneur, and podcast host. And her podcast is about sports and phenomena around health. Thanks and welcome. Thank you for joining us, Minna.
Thank you. Hello, guys.
Next, we have Christina Sweet. She is the CEO of The Shortcut. She has worked with large multinationals, Canada's largest oil and gas, National Railway, and Kone. Founder of a company in Finland for 5 years and is the president of the Finnish Canadian Chamber of Commerce. Thank you and welcome. Thanks for joining us, Christina.
Thanks for having me.
Great.
Sorry, Namrata, I forgot to mention one thing before you ask the first question.
Sure.
Very important. Please note, guys, the floor is open to your questions. You can ask your questions at any time. Just type them into the chat and we will continuously monitor them. Thank you.
All right. So the first question we want to start with is, why aren't there that many female leaders, and what are the issues preventing more women to be in leadership positions?
Who wants to go first?
I can start because naturally we have to go back quite a while in the history of women, and the whole story actually began from the year past 10,000 years ago when we started becoming, instead of being those collector hunters, we began kind of agricultural way of living. And that means that when we started owning property, owning land, it means that men had to start securing that women who are pregnant are actually carrying their children. And then it became also the ownership of women, because they had to secure that if we provide for this baby, the man had to secure that also the baby is his, because then the child will be also inheriting the land and such. So we have to remember that this is quite a long journey, that women have been oppressed and being under control and also under kind of ownership of men. So this is not something that has happened recently, but has been happening over the years. And it's kind of obvious that before this agricultural movement, women were actually more in leadership positions. So it was a matriarchal culture, and we started going toward patriarchal society. So the recent years that women have kind of become more and more involved in the workforce means that the culture in those companies has to be changing, and mindset of the ways how leaders are perceived has to also change. So kind of just to set the stage here, we have to remember that this has been going on not only for decades or a century, it has been going on for millennial. So I can give the mic and open the floor for others to continue from this, but just to remember that it's not something that has happened recently, but it has actually been there for a while.
Yeah, well, I'll pick it up from where Anna left it off, and I want to talk about how we grew up. Think about it. All the James Bond movies, see the setup. We have the agent with the gun and the cool car, and then there's the secretary, Moneypenny. It's a society that has put us where we are right now, right? So to get out of that, we need a little bit more of women that are so-called tomboys, right? So they want to be the agent, and they don't care about that, what society puts us in.
Maybe I can also add a little bit. So when we're looking at the corporate perspective, I think that one of the challenges, besides these are very layered, there's so much that sort of impacts or informs the decisions that we take ourselves as women, but also sort of the paths which we're sort of navigated into, if you will. But I think one of the other challenges is that because naturally we're the ones having children, we quite often have a break in our career. So while we're at home raising family, even if it's for a short period of time, we're not in the workforce gaining the same years of experience, which historically the years of experience is usually what leads you to the top of an organization. So if there's gaps in your ability to contribute to the workforce, then that naturally then means that you're sort of lower, or it takes you more time to get to the top. And I think now when we see countries like Finland who are looking very closely at parental leave and how that's potentially evenly divided against men and women, this might help minimize or negate some of those challenges that come from having a society where historically women are the people who stay home with children. I think this is a very one of the biggest reasons why we see less women at the top. We see women who leave to have children and might not come back. We also have pay equity. So if you're going to have a parent pay inequity. So if you're going to have one parent who stays home, usually it's the parent who makes less money, that's a woman. And then you layer on top of it that if you have more than one child and you're many years away from the workforce, you're behind your male counterparts who have been there earning their dues along the way. So I think that historically, these might be some of the reasons why in the corporate world you see less women at the top.
Right. It's all very much a great point. I think the fact, Anna, that you started reminding us that it's not a new issue, putting it back into perspective a little bit. That's for me was like, oh yeah, that's very true. Minna, were you saying that the society, there's not enough, when you were talking about, James Bond and the secretary, are you saying that in the society, there's not enough women who are role models that could inspire others?
Not really. I'm saying that in society, like Christina said, that we're kind of like driven into the certain way of doing things. If we want a family, it's me who is carrying the child and the husband is continuing to work, right? So, it's the movies, it's the careers that are directing us towards that. And it doesn't necessarily mean that we don't have, role models. It's just, when I was growing up, I didn't watch Wonder Woman or Captain Marvel. I was watching James Bond. So it's kind of like bedded into us already, as this is, if we want to have offspring, this is how it's done. There was no other option. Whereas nowadays we do have an option. We get to choose who, we've always gotten to choose who stays home, but now it's more out there that also fathers can stay home with the kids.
All right. Another question: why businesses, or maybe the society in general, need more female leaders? What do women bring that can make a difference in the workplace? Anna, would you like to start again?
Yes, I can start from this, and I have one word for describing it. It brings balance. There is a reason that we have different types of people, and that's why we have variety in people's personalities, and also that's why there is feminine and masculine. And it doesn't nowadays, of course, mean that only the perspective of gender. We need all kinds of people, different types of people in workplaces, and this is kind of where me and Christina have already been talking quite a lot. It's about the diversity, and it's about the inclusion, to understand the perspectives also, not only from the company perspective, but from the customer perspective. And many times we all know that this world is created by mostly of white men. And it means that there is a lot of bias. And for example, in technology, everyone knows that we need women so that they can bring their expertise on the table because they know best. For example, there was this one Finnish entrepreneur, and she is making dildos. But recently she had to kind of stop her work. She got so much hate mail. She got so much sexual harassment, and she was so overwhelmed with all the negativity that was accompanied her with her work, that she simply couldn't cope with it anymore. And when we consider dildos, those are something that are created by women for women, which is kind of the best way to do it. So why on earth a woman who is doing this kind of work and showing kind of it with her own faces gets all that hate, but men have been doing that for decades, and kind of how on earth is that possible? So in that sense, we need the diversity, we need women, and of course it's not about the gender. We cannot assume that, okay, if we just have these people 50% women and then everything is kind of magically fixed. It doesn't mean that. Of course you have to have right kind of people in right types of positions, but companies should start thinking about their consumers and then the customers. What kind of company we are, what are the demands from our customer perspective, what kind of people we need in the place so that we are able to communicate and create the value we are trying to create with our company, and how do we actually engage with those people who are our users or of our products or services. So it's not only about having women there, but to have right kind of people.
Christina, Minna, would you like to add on?
Sure, I can
Sure,
follow
go
up.
ahead.
Thanks. So to add on top of that, I think we can look at the science behind it and the studies behind it, and depending on which study you're looking at, teams that are diverse or that have women at the leadership will generally perform up to several % better from a revenue and profit perspective, because diversity brings more balance, as Anna was saying. But it's proven with the money sitting behind that having a diverse team and having women at the top generally will lead to better results. And I think that this itself should be a motivator for anybody that is a profit-driven company, that at least to give it a try. But I think we have this unconscious bias in the way that we see things. And I forget the name of the study, but there was a study done in the US. So women are like 53% roughly. And they're actually in control of the disposable income in the US, but the marketers are still selling to men. So if you're looking like for a car, for example, they're selling with beautiful women or with speed or whatever, but not with necessarily a baby car seat in the back or whatever they think. But when they look at the studies of who makes the decision to buy that car, it was something like 60-some% of families, the woman in a sort of traditional family would be making the decision of what car to buy, yet the advertising is still geared towards men. And I think this is a great example of how companies are missing the mark, because if they had an advertising that was geared towards the person who was actually making the purchase decision, they might be receiving different results. And so having a leadership team and a company that reflects the consumer base is really key, I think, to be able to sell your products if you're in the business of sales, which all companies are.
To continue what Christina said, it's also you want to think about what do we want to see when we see the person in customer service? How does a woman versus men are going to deal with the details of the issue? You know, they say devil's in the details. And if we really start looking at it, you know, we're talking about, all right, so we have someone who makes the decision about buying the car. It ends up being the woman. But what comes to, you know, buying the groceries or just decoration of your house? How many guys can honestly say that they have made a decision about the rug, about the vacuum cleaner, whatever it is? Like you said, Christina, we do sit on the purse end of the day. What comes to the companies that, well, what I've worked in, there's been a lot of guys in the lead, and now the details, teeny tiny details that the customers are also seeing are missing. You know, the guys see the big picture. They see that, all right, all we need is this, and this. Now we have a company. Yeah, sure. But how are we going to do these things? How are we going to address these issues? How are we going to communicate with the client when the client is a female who doesn't agree with you with certain things, especially when we're in the health sector? You know, you as a male trainer don't necessarily know something about pregnancies and training a pregnant client. So having that information also from women and from women's perspective will make that team stronger. So ignoring that is ignoring your client.
All right. So it's interesting because I'm reading a book right now, which is called Invisible Women: Exposing Data Bias in a World Designed for Men. And they're talking exactly about that, how everything is biased towards men. And I have to say that for me as a man, and that is why I'm very happy to be here today in having that discussion, it's awakening. It's like I've never realized that before. But how could I? Because everything is biased towards me as a man. I'm in it. And reading these things, it's like, whoa, it's blowing my mind that I would actually, yes, you know, you run a company, 50% of your audience potentially is women. But if you only have men, how can you design the right product if you only have men in your company? Sorry, I'm digressing. Now, Namrata, would you like to ask the second another question?
Sure, thanks. Thank you. The next one is, one issue that keeps coming back is the fact that women face difficulties trusting their own voices or advocating on their own behalf. They talk about fear more than men. Why is that? what can the society and especially men can do to support women in general and women leadership in particular?
Maybe I can start first this time. So I'm a little bit sensitive to these kind of questions because I don't necessarily, while I'm sure there are folks who struggle to have their voice heard and for sure feel fearful in the organization, I think this is perpetuating a stereotype that men tell people or that non-women tell people that we're fearful or we struggle to find our voice. I don't see that. I think that in all genders and in cultures, there are folks who have a voice and folks who don't, or feel more comfortable to share their voice and share their don't. Where I think maybe the challenge becomes is that because most organizations are still male dominated, they might not hear the voice, which is different than not having a voice, in my opinion. And I think that the question about what our colleagues can do, whether they're male or female, is I think that one, we should first, as a person speaking it, feel comfortable, confident enough to say it multiple times if it's needed in a non-aggressive way, so that we're properly heard. And I think that we should be demanding of our colleagues and our bosses that they're openly listening, because these are the ideas, especially in corporate world, these are the ideas which we're there to make a difference in. We're there to make the bottom line and potentially maybe even get personal bonuses and stuff. So there's validity in being heard. And I think that calling people out when you're not being heard in a constructive way is the way to go, and to make sure that our colleagues are calling it out if they're seeing that people aren't hearing. But I disagree that we don't have a voice. There are people who don't, but by nature, I think women are as powerful with their voice as men are.
To piggyback from that, yeah, I'm allergic to that type of question as well a little bit. I think it's more about people listening, having the culture of listening and understanding that there's more than one opinion about stuff. It's to answer the second question, I think the company should nurture a culture where failing and being scared is okay, regardless if that person is a female or male. You know, we all have those feelings. Some of us are coming stronger forward with them than others. You know, it's not necessarily being weak if you are able to voice what you think or anything else. But long and short of it, we should really nurture the culture of speaking and communicating, especially now when we live in social media. You know, the actual communication skills have really, you know, they've gone downhill.
Yes, I could continue from here that I understand that there are kind of difficulties for some women to be heard because of the quite aggressive culture that has been built around of how success has been perceived. So many times it might be that as male might be seen as more aggressive. So there might be a company culture where you succeed, who you kind of like the survival of the fittest. So it's kind of like the most aggressive gets the room and the floor, and they might be those who are shouting on each other or kind of silencing people. So in that kind of cases where there is all men, and then there is only few females, it might be that the culture already is so toxic that it's hard for those women to kind of get their voices heard. Then there are strong women, like it seems all of us here in panels, who don't take that type of kind of attitude, and we are able to say what we think, and we are able to say that, okay, F off, I don't care about your opinion, I can fight back, and I don't perceive myself as a weaker, and it's also about the personality. And of course we understand that many times women are much more empathic. So you are able to think about how the other person feels, and it might make you more hurtful when someone is aggressive towards you. and kind of how we could make women to trust more on themselves. It's of course about raising awareness like we are doing with this panel discussion, but also get more kind of changes in the way that corporates are built, what kind of toxic environment there is, opportunities for people to report if there is any type of harassment. We know that sexual harassment, for example, in workplaces, it's the real deal, but many times women are unable to report to anyone because those who would be in charge of that type of conversations are not hearing, or they ignore it, or they don't have any procedures how to continue, what to do if someone feels this type of harassment in the workplace. And how we could support this, I think it's more men should be reading books like you are reading to kind of open their eyes. We need people to open their eyes, and we should stop this, I call it in Finnish, eipäs juupas. It's like yes, no discussion where women say that, hey, someone did this to me, and then there are men jumping into the conversation, mansplaining stuff, or ignoring or belittling or minimizing the harm and such. So people should start respecting each other more, and that might be one of the key issues here, that we just respect each other.
Right, it's interesting because there's a lot of comments going on in the chat. It's a hot topic, and Stephanie is asking a question that goes along the similar what you talk about. She says, I've struggled with for a long time during my own career that the issue is not only that we have to prove we are better placed than men for a certain position, but also have to prove we are better than every other single woman in the workplace. For me, that often created a rather toxic environment of jealousy between the women in my work environment rather than supporting each other. And she asked the question, how can we overcome this? So I'm turning to you, ladies, how can we overcome this?
I could start. I thought about this for a little bit, as this was kind of like one of your questions you sent us. And it made me wonder. I really thought about it a long time. And I circled back into not just communication, but also like kind of self-study. You know, why are we so jealous of someone? If someone who represents our gender is doing really well, shouldn't we celebrate it and kind of get encouraged by it and be like, all right, we can do this too. I can do this too. Instead of being scared of someone's going to be, you know, stepping over you. Yeah.
Okay.
I can answer as well that I think it's an interesting skill set that women or folks with any sort of diversity build, which is like to be better, faster, stronger. You know, by nature, we have to accommodate, and whether or not we're consciously aware of the skills that we're building, I think because we are forced, if we're ambitious, or if we have a voice, or if we're passionate, or in a specialized, well, anybody, but it requires us to be more than, and this more than sort of position can lead to great successes, and a lot of positive things can come from that, because it really pushes you to be sort of the best version of yourself in whatever it is that you're working in. But it does lead to a competitive nature. And I think, like, at least for my own self, I've caught myself, because I've created sort of this skill set of being able to quickly adapt and read a situation. And I've always worked predominantly with men. So this is a skill that I've acquired over 20 some years of working, but I do find that inherently it's created in me a very competitive nature. And so what I do is I it took me a long time to realize this, but when I see that coming up, I sort of self-identify that, and recognize that my own ambition and my own skill, if you will, of adaptability has triggered this. And so I always try and recognize, is this a valid competition, or am I making this a competition because I'm so used to competing? And so I would recommend as well that women sort of self-look. It's not our job necessarily, but in order to make sure that all women are getting the opportunity to progress and to have a voice and to move up, and are supported, that we self-assess and say, okay, is this a real competition, or am I making stuff up because of the way that we've been kind of professionally raised?
All right. So I would like to get a bit practical. You started talking about that. What would you recommend to a CEO of a company, regardless of the gender, to make sure that the business promote more women into leadership positions? Let's be as practical as possible, please.
Yes, I can start. So I would recommend that every company start kind of doing an inventory. How are these practices taking place? How many men and women they have in the workplace, in what kind of positions? And also to be brutally honest, how are we treating each other? Are we having this competitive, toxic, masculine culture here? Do we actually have practices in place where women can feel that they are welcome in the company? Do we take into consideration the bias that might be around? So mainly it's about this, that how do we perceive ourselves to be? And especially in big companies, I would even recommend to have their own kind of diversity and inclusion department, where they actually concentrate on these type of issues. And I would like to bring more men into the discussion, to ask them why are we still in this position? It's not about us women fighting here together, but I think it's more about our common structure. It's our common problem. It's affecting men as well. So it's not us against them. It should be together us doing this. So I would recommend to start discussions more, open the table, so that people on the leadership positions, that they could actually listen, as we have been mentioning quite many times here, that it's about listening and acknowledging that there are problems. And we know, we have statistics, we have studies that there, for example, the sexual harassment is a reality in many workplaces. So many times the leadership dilemma is not so much of a problem of the person not being able to proceed in a company, but it might be the problem that she is, for example, being harassed and she has to switch the job because she cannot deal with it anymore and she cannot tell about it to anyone. So it's also about day-to-day level. How do we treat our employees inside the company? What are our values? How do we take, how seriously we take if someone is opening up and telling about the problems? Do we have the procedures in place? Can anyone report to anyone about these issues? Do we have a person, and do we actually have any willingness to do something about it?
Maybe I can add as well that I work for my own principles, and with the company that I work with, the Shortcut, we do this walk the talk mentality. So if you want a diverse team, then you hire diverse. If you want an equally gender balanced leadership team, then you make it happen. I think that we need to make our leadership, our CEOs, accountable because saying that you want diversity in your organization, saying that you want gender balance means nothing if your organization is not gender balanced or diverse. So I think that that one, we need to highlight CEOs, men and women who walk the talk, and we show that. And I think that we can also look at the numbers that sit underneath those men and women when they do have diversity in their team. And I think then as leaders, they should also be expecting that from the folks and the line managers and the hiring managers, and make them accountable for hiring. If the vision is to have a diverse organization, that they're hiring in a diverse way. So for example, if you have a male manager that's predominantly hiring men, that, you know, there's, and I'm not talking about quotas here, but I'm talking about walking the talk. So making sure that people are behaving, you set the tone, not with your words, but with your actions. And then you make sure the folks working for you are mirroring those actions as well. And there's accountability for not mirroring those actions. So I'm a big proponent that actions are way louder than words, and that when we get enough people working in this kind of mentality or diversity, that it sort of becomes the norm. And then you're going to be the odd one if you only have a male leadership team. And we can already see in the stock listed companies that they've already moved to this diverse, gender balanced as a norm. And companies are right away called out if they're a stock listed company and they don't reflect that. So I think that we're seeing some progress, but we need to make our CEOs accountable for behaving in the way that they're speaking.
Yeah, I mean, being practical, be transparent. You know, you as a CEO, you're in charge of your company's culture. So what you do will trickle down. So I think the CEO's behavior is the first practical thing to do. Fix it, and you know, hire more women, be more diverse.
Yeah. So if you want diversity, just I'm a woman.
I mean,
yeah.
just do it. Like, stop talking and start acting.
Yes, and I could add here that the Simon Sinek Start With Why works with this as well. Start with why. Why do we need them? Why do we need more diversity? Why do we need more women? And start kind of working from why outside. It will tell you that why we need more women leaders.
It's a great reference. I love Simon Sinek. Namrata, would you like to ask another question?
Yeah, it's what advice do you have for women looking to grow either their own business or within the company they work for?
I could start this time. So very simple. You know, don't try to make it too difficult for yourself. Be clear to yourself. What do you want from your career? What do you want from your business? You're the one who is behind the steering wheel. Be okay with failing. You know, all great leaders, they didn't get it right the first time. Like, if I would get a penny every time I made a little mistake, I'd be rich right now. You know, only difference between the ones that actually succeeded and those who didn't is that the one who succeeded never stopped trying. They always came up with something else. So if you fail, so what happens? You know, you break a mug, you buy a new one. You do something else. You find something that you actually like to do and care for yourself. Stop caring for what others say. Do you? Especially if it's your own company.
I would recommend that yes, you're kind of in control of your own destiny, but I would say to make very clear goals for yourself and be true, authentic, and genuine, ambitious, and courageous. I think no matter what gender you are, if you're wanting to go up or start your own company or whatever it is that you're passionate about, I think that being true to that passion and courageous is really key. And what I would say is that there are a lot of insecurities that come with putting yourself out there. And some of those can be mitigated. You can have a savings account potentially, or a partner that's willing to support if you're taking a risk or whatever. But some of those decisions just require bravery. So I would say that my advice that I normally give to folks, and we work with a lot of diverse folks at the Shortcut, and many of those folks are vulnerable, is that always be.
I'm sorry, someone, Kirsty, could you mute your mic, please? Thank you.
That we work with a lot of diverse folks, and some of those are vulnerable, and the message I always tell people is, say yes when you're offered opportunity, and always be looking for opportunity, but to know your self-worth. And I don't really mean in a monetary way, although that might also be in the equation, but I mean that no job is beneath you. So you should always do your best, put the most work in, be the hardest worker in the room. And this is true whether you're male or female, but I think if you're genuine, authentic, a hard worker, and have good attitude, and those other things come, eventually you meet the right people. Eventually they recognize what you're doing. So just be brave is what I always say, and have a plan.
Go on,
yes,
Anna.
Wonderful suggestions. And I would like to add here that create your own reality. It's about you. It's about just your attitude. Go for it. If there is something that you dream about, if there is anything that you have always wanted to do, just go for it. And remember that the passion comes from within. So it's always about you. Success doesn't care about your gender or color or anything like that. It's all about you. So it's kind of also our way of creating this new world. When we take our steps towards creating what we are passionate about, that's kind of a natural path to show that, yeah, we can do it. Of course we can do it. We know that we can do it. And my tip is exactly the same as Minna's and Christina's. Just go for it. Start acquiring your dream and do whatever it takes to go for it. I had to clear a lot of fear before I was able to jump and take the leap of faith. It's not easy, and it's not supposed to be easy. And as Minna said, if you break something, you usually find a way to fix it, or you buy a new one. So don't be afraid of failures, because those are inevitable. You cannot learn if you don't fail. You don't know what mistake you made if you don't make those, so you are able to correct the course. So just go for it.
Thank you, ladies. Wonderful tips. I would love to talk about men now a little bit. I would like to know, actually, from the audience, how many participants are men? Because my gut feelings is that there's a lot more women today participating than men. And what I have learned as a man is that if I want to be part of the solution, I first need to be more self-aware of the problem. And I have to say, I was not as aware as I should have been. And there is an interesting question from Alain, and I hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly. The question is, why don't we raise our expectations of men? Instead of poor guy is male and just not as empathic, for example, we just have to work with that. They have the ability to be empathetic. We should begin by expecting that. What's your take on this particular point? What can we men do to help? Someone has to go first.
I can go. I would suggest that men would stop ignoring, that they would educate themselves and to take this seriously, that we are still in the same situation almost that when we look back 20 years ago or 30 years ago. We are still repeating some of the same statements. Of course, there has been progress, but still I'm kind of it's quite frustrating to say that we are not speeding up as fast as we should be, especially now in the digital era. We should progress much more faster. So I would recommend men to start asking from their co-workers, from people around their circles, in friends and family, and ask about women, educate themselves, learn, get knowledge, understand, and start figuring out, how can I help? How can I help this woman? How can I support her? How can I ask her, what can I do for you? How can we do this together? So I would go more for, of course, also for networking, finding more men and female both in your network, and start kind of supporting. Ask, how can I help?
Yeah, and
sorry, my camera is, sorry, can I add a point there? My camera is not working, but I hope you can hear me.
I'm sorry, we're not opening the floor to questions yet. Let me now go on.
It's not a question. Okay, yeah.
I'll come back to you after. I'll come back to you after.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's not a question. I want to add to a point that you're
no problem. No problem. I'll come back to you after.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, so to add on that, I mean, stop saying boys will be boys. Stop using that excuse. And, don't be so afraid that there's a female coworker who might know more than you. Ask questions, read a book.
I can also add then that I think that when we see sort of the Me Too movements and that we see folks being called out and held accountable to what was sort of this normal boys club behavior, I think it's opened the eyes of those who want to have their eyes opened. And I think it's created a bit, I don't know if this is the right word, but like male fragility, where there's like this, men are victims now somehow and they can't do anything right. And so trying to capture those who have seen the light and help educate, and then continue the work to help bring the rest along. And one piece of advice that I got is I had the great fortune of having some professional coaching by a fellow who coaches Fortune 500 CEOs. And he said to me, at the time I was working in defense, so I was usually the only female in the room. And he said to me, use the fact that you're the only woman to the advantage and flip the tables. So he said, when you walk into a room and you're the only woman there, they all want your attention. And you can use their vulnerability to make sure that you're getting what you need professionally. And I use this all the time. I kind of understand the dynamic, or I do my best to understand the dynamic in the room or the leadership, and play, for example, if it's an overtly masculine and feel or tone, to try and use that to flip the tables. And so I would also recommend that using your perceived weakness really as your point of strength. And a lot of times, because there is sort of this unconscious bias of or being, I'm the man, I'm the boss, or whatever it is, you can quite swiftly or secretly switch in to this mode that they're not comfortable with, and you suddenly flip the dynamics. So I would recommend that you kind of recognize the dynamic in the room, and then you use your perceived vulnerability to your strength.
All right, thank you for these tips. I hope they went to more men than only Sergey and myself. I don't know how many men there are in the audience. We have a question from H.J. Yost. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing correctly. I hope I do. How can I write a job advertisement so that women apply? We're talking here the high-tech sector. AJ says, I would love to hire more, but they don't apply.
Well, that's a difficult question without any kind of more info to it. But of course, kind of understanding that the language that you use, it should be without any gender bias in it. But maybe you can also shout out, just ask, women, where are you? We are looking for you. We need more women in our company. And would you like to share this with your sister, your mother, your aunt, your cousin, whoever? We are looking for you. So maybe just kind of direct it towards women if you are looking for women. So you can say it straight.
If I can add to that, we had, not at my own company, but an example of this where it kind of backfired, that where folks are looking, for example, you say you're looking for a diverse hire, or that you're a company open to diversity, and then you get the backlash of, okay, well, what about those who aren't diverse? So I think it walks a fine balance between calling out for a specific profile that you're looking for and not limiting the others. And I don't know how to solve that. At the Shortcut, we had a training solution that was geared for folks under the age of 35, because this is a unemployed demographic that is really hurting at the moment in Finland. And we got all kinds of comments that because we're being age biased. So I think you just have to accept that sometimes even if the intention is not, and usually it's not, you're going to not always win with everybody, and you have to be okay with that.
All right. Right, we've been talking for 55 minutes. Let's open the floor to questions. I will give you the choice. Either guys, you write the question in the chat box, sorry, or you raise your hand and you can be unmuted. And I think we have a hand raised by Maher. Maher, do you have a question?
Oh, sorry, my hand has been raised for a bit of time, demonstrating that I'm also a fellow supporter to you.
Oh, you're another man. Yeah.
Yeah, so basically, thank you, everyone. Excellent discussions and ideas. You know, it's like you nailed it, everyone. My full support to all of the arguments, excellent ideas and everything. I would suggest one thing, perhaps, to the female leaders or future leaders or fellow employees and everything. When you feel it's, sometimes you need to educate your male fellows as well. Sometimes, you know, it's like, I know you could perhaps not ask for how you would like to be treated, but if there is something going wrong, point it out. That would help, you know. It's like, at least if it does not work for the first time, it might work on the long run. If you feel that there is something that should be done, or some knowledge should be passed on, could be done directly, indirectly, and there are a million ways. Of course, you know, it's like staying silent is not the optimal option. So keep shining, and thanks for the discussion.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other questions? Anybody from the audience? There was a lot of discussion. Anyone?
I just saw a comment here. Someone has written about a diversity hire, and I think that when, as an employee who says that they're open to diversity, I see that as a welcome sign. But interesting that this is learning for me, because I understand now that maybe some people feel like that's not, that it's like a, how do I say it? Well, I don't want to, it says that it's insulting somehow to be called a diversity hire. And I would love to have a conversation about that, because if there's a way that we can choose different language that makes it so that people know that we're a company that supports and enjoys folks from all kinds of backgrounds, and that if there's different language we could use to make sure that it's open and clear without insulting folks, that's all ultimately the end goal. So I would welcome you can find us on our website, or you can contact me there, but I would be very keen to have more information on how that makes people feel, and if there's a suggestion about how we can use different wording to make it better.
Oh, right. Yeah, like I said, very hot topic, a lot of discussion, and I hope that it was valuable for everyone. We have time to take one more question if there is anybody in the audience who wants to ask a question. Going for once, going for twice. All right then, well, thank you very much everyone for participating. Thank you, Anna, Mina, Christina, for attending and for sharing your knowledge and being passionate about it. I hope this was valuable for people who attended. It was definitely valuable for me. Sergey, would you like to close this session?
Yes, this was a really, really amazing discussion, and thank you everyone for participating in this event. And I would like also to engage you to maybe stay in touch, and also recommend to join our community, Access Helsinki. And we always try to help and to support as much as possible. And thank you guys for joining us. It was like really amazing. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. See you next time.
Thank you for joining. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.